Hi, my name is Anna, and today I'm going to just give a brief overview of the research that I am doing in both LongCovered and ME/CFS here in New Zealand, and my connections also with the work that's ongoing overseas as well. So first of all, I'll just give a brief introduction about me and how I found myself in the space, if you like. So I'm a senior lecturer and cellular immunologist at the University of Auckland. And so my core expertise or my sort of my interests lie in understanding immune perturbations, or what is going on in our bloodstream. So we often bleed people to get our cell samples, and we use tools such as spectral flow cytometry, which I won't go into the details of that, but essentially we can dive deep into the immune system to get a better understanding of any of these illnesses that involve immunity, if you like. So I've got an extensive history of various different projects, but currently my main research study at the moment is trying to understand the immune dysfunction that is involved in long COVID and how that relates to, or the relationship with, what we know about immune dysfunction of ME/CFS as well. So I'm also currently sitting on the AIMSME's committee. I'm very well connected with and work closely with patient groups here in New Zealand impacted by the COVID-19, or essentially long COVID. I also work with patient groups across in Australia as well, and sort of a connected there. Plus there are loads of international groups in this space too. And I guess the core thing for me is that I have this real passion and I guess really see the emphasis and necessity to work closely with patients, given the long history of neglect, and especially in ME/CFS, and learning from ME is really critical, as we all know. So it was no coincidence, if you like, that it was critical to bring what's known about ME/CFS into the space of long COVID to move research forward and the general understanding about post-viral illnesses together as one, if you like. So that's sort of the overall history here. I was following along with the pandemic before it sort of hit our shores, before it was being realized here. And so I saw this opportunity, if you like, or need rather, that there was going to be this wave or a lot of post-viral illness issues. And I could see this brewing overseas, that patient voices were not being heard. So that's sort of just a really, really quick overview of the history of me finding myself in this space. And I guess, yeah, it's nothing new that, that ME/CFS research has been largely neglected from a medical perspective, plus also from, the research funding. And so we really only were able to kick off this research, or at least, from my lab, by reaching out into, the community and crowdfunding to start our research. So that was also a critical part. In a critical area that I'm passionate about raising awareness about as well, that we need loads more resourcing in this space. So just a brief overview about long COVID. We hear a lot about this, and this will be no surprise to those of you with ME/CFS, because the overlap is obviously very obvious. So the key aspect here is obviously that there is an urgent need to better understand the post-viral illnesses. Obviously, ME can be caused by other infections and other causes, but the critical area of my research, or I guess in this space, is understanding what happens to our bodies when we're infected with viruses. And, what do we need to understand more about that? What aspects? Because obviously, we don't know enough. The fact that we walk around with what I describe as onboard viruses, or passengers from having viral infections, that live in us in a latent capacity, we still don't really have a strong understanding of how our immune system is constantly keeping those in check And then I guess when our immune system fails us and suddenly we're, presented with these post-viral illnesses or ME/CFS. Again, in the ME/CFS space, it was no surprise that SARS-CoV-2 was likely to also cause post-viral illnesses. So, if we look back historically at the other coronavirus viruses that caused alarm, SARS and MERS, there were cases there of around 50% of people going on to have these post-viral illnesses. I guess, if we were to go back in time, maybe the term long COVID wouldn't have been coined, but rather it would have been recognised early on that ME/CFS was going to be a possibility of this viral infection. However, we're also mindful that there may be unique aspects of SARS-CoV-2 as well, and maybe the spectrum of long-term impacts is going to be greater, if you like, or different layers. So yes, the term long COVID is an umbrella term, and there's on the diagram here is just obviously listing off the sort of key symptoms and involvement. It's a multi-system disorder, and anyone obviously realizes that these symptoms and these symptoms and organ involvement very much overlaps with the ME/CFS. So if we look at long COVID specifically, we know that vaccinations have been providing some protection, but it's not going to be completely protective. We were hearing early on in the research space that, that this was going to affect 10 to 30% of those that get infected. With the vaccinations, that's likely to come down. I think the newest research is saying possibly around 10%. That's still a lot of people who will need medical care moving forward. And there is an urgent need to prevent this, to treat this, and to improve quality of life. So this area of research is absolutely critical, and it's going to undoubtedly lead to us learning more about, pre-pandemic ME/CFS and the other viruses that cause ME/CFS, such as EBV and, as listed here, Ross River virus, and others that may be involved too. So this slide here just is sort of giving an overarching sort of overview of the potential hypotheses surrounding, what is causing long COVID. Again, we've learned from ME in this space, or at least those people who are doing long COVID research are drawing on what we already know about ME research. And again, the similarities, there is a lot of similarities and crossover. And the key aspect here is that we now want to sink resources into this space to really understand why this is going on. And then again, align it with other viruses as well to sort of see where the similarities align. So there's sort of key areas here that I'll just draw on quickly that we absolutely know immune dysregulation is involved here. The immune system is always, we don't get rid of viruses or control them without our immune system. And sometimes it gets it wrong. We don't know if this is, an overreactive immune system. We don't know if it's turned on in a wrong way or turned off in a wrong way. We also know that autoimmunity is a condition. It's an immune condition where our body starts fighting itself. So this can come about by, sort of an accident or a misfiring event during viral infections. And so we can end up with antibodies that might cause us harm or immune cells that might cause us harm. So from the immune dysregulation side, we've got lots going on there. Dysbiosis is sort of a term that sort of implies that our natural microbiome, all the bugs that naturally live in our gut and our mouth and all our mucosal surfaces, keeping us safe from our environment, that can cause an upset. So under that umbrella also is where we in the ME/CFS space is discussed a lot is, again, our onboard viruses may get reactivated. So that whole EBV, CMV, or there's a bunch of viruses that live within us. A classic reactivation that many people are aware of is when our historical chickenpox virus resurfaces as shingles. And so that's, those viruses live within us for life. And when we get a viral insult or infection, that can cause a disruption. So that's sort of the immune dysregulation side. There's loads of hypotheses there. Some of them are working hypotheses, some are showing strong links, but we need to do a lot more research to sort of see what this particular virus is doing. Is the virus hiding out in organs somewhere? People are talking about a viral depot, but it could be that the immune system's just not cleared out the viral debris. Loads more to understand there. And then on the other side, a key thing with this virus is vascular damage, and the term hypercoagulation, or essentially the blood clotting system, has been impacted. So there's a lot of research in this space going on. As I've mentioned, that's why this is sort of highlighted the side that the inflammatory immune cells might be contributing to this issue. We don't really know the sort of chicken or egg scenario. What is keeping the body in a hyperinflamed state, or whatever that may be? There's obviously a lot of historical work in the ME space about mitochondrial dysfunction, and we absolutely know that there's the strong link to post-exertional malaise for both people with long COVID and ME being linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. And again, I guess the key aspect here is that we just need to understand more and draw on what we do know from ME research to better understand this virus, and then better understand how we can form treatments and better medical, basically to improve quality of life. That's the underlying goal here, obviously, is to sink resources into the research, whether it's this virus or other viruses, and whether it's early onset, like in the sort of early phases of clearing a virus, or whether you've got deep-seated ME that you've had, for a long time. They may end up being two different areas of research. So we're trying to dissect as much as we can. And this is the early days of sort of unpacking. We're in the early days with understanding what this virus is doing, but we'll absolutely be able to apply the knowledge we gain from this, the early onset to the other viruses. After all the other viruses have not gone away just because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm just going to quickly step through, I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll just quickly step through some of the key aims, or the research that I'm planning to undertake, how far we've got and where we're heading to. So the overarching title of my research project is Immunity and Molecular Studies of SARS-CoV-2 Infection, and how that relates to post-viral conditions such as ME/CFS, and also how vaccination is impacting people as well. So this is in collaboration with Professor Warren Tate down in Otago. And so the aim here is that, I'll be doing sort of the deep dive immune characterization on the immune cells. And once we've done sort of some preliminary work, then we'll send samples down to Warren, and he will apply all his knowledge and some of the findings already he's found in ME/CFS to our LongCovered patients as well. So we can start to sort of utilize our different skill sets to try and understand more about what this virus is doing. So from my perspective, sort of the key aims or immunity objectives, if you like, is that we'll be using some of the immune tools or my core expertise, if you like, to see if we can find historical COVID-19 infection in people so that we can stratify them. What happened early on in the pandemic is that many people didn't get access to testing, so especially early 2020. So we will be using immune tools to see if we can find immune cells that tell us that someone had COVID-19. And if we can't find those cells, or if there is no indicator that someone had COVID-19, we will stratify those patients into new onset ME/CFS or ME/CFS-like post-viral condition. So again, the key aspect there is that we will be getting people who got infected with a virus early 2020 and are still unwell. So that's sort of one of the unique aspects of our study, is that, very early on, people were shut out of research because, they didn't have a PCR test and all the rest of it. So this is an all-inclusive study. So it didn't matter which virus you were infected, or, you can sign up if you suspect that you had this virus, because we will use tools to understand further. We want to then track immunity and the quality of the immune response and people that are now, still ill 2 years later, and of course we are signing up many more from the Omicron wave. We want to understand if the immune system, the immune response to the virus was normal or whether that was dysfunctional. And we also have samples stored pre and post vaccination early on. So we wanted to understand, if the vaccination improved people or whether that, was unrelated. So at the moment, we really don't know whether the quality of someone's immune response relates to whether or not they go on to get a post-viral illness. So that's sort of one of our key questions. So that's sort of the immune objectives. And then the second bunch of objectives is more relating to, the post-viral condition or the dysfunction as such. So we want to sort of develop various tests, and this is the really urgent aspect. We really want to get underway as soon as possible with our samples we have stored, to sort of see if we can find anything in the blood of patients that sort of indicate that they have a condition. As we all know, there is no test for ME/CFS. There is no test that you can go along to the doctor and they will say, yes, you have a post-viral condition. So that's a really, really urgent aspect. We know that we know that in circulation, or we know that the immune system is disrupted. We know that people are unwell. We know that we just haven't found the right marker that can be easily developed. So that is one of the critical aims of our study. And obviously, once we've developed that for sort of early or recent infection, post-viral illnesses, such as, 1 to 2 years since your infection, we will then obviously want to apply that to anyone who has, chronic ME/CFS, to sort of see, does that change over time? So that's sort of a long-term objective. But these ones are sort of more related to our current patient cohort or those impacted by COVID-19. So using our, characterization tools, we will be assessing to sort of identify, again, drawing on the ME/CFS literature and studies that have been done before to indicate dysfunction. We will be sort of drawing on those and expanding them with essentially with the leading edge technologies that we have here, which is, some of the characterization tools we have here. It will be a world first for ME/CFS like patients, plus also in the COVID space too. So we call that deep immune profiling. So we'll be characterizing all the different immune cells in blood samples. We will also, as I've just sort of referred to, we'll be also looking at serology, the immune response, which I've just talked about. Plus also we'll be looking into the plasma samples. Once we've removed all the immune cells to do that, to do the characterization there, we'll be looking at plasma samples for all types of inflammatory proteins. As I alluded to earlier, vascular damage or blood vessel damage has been indicated as an issue in long COVID. So we'll be looking for markers of vascular damage. We'll be looking for inflammatory proteins that could indicate neuro problems or, associated with brain fog and all the rest of it. So essentially screening as much as possible. I'll also have started conversations to collaborate with a phenomenal group over in Western Australia to do those studies too. So there's lots going on as we speak. And then obviously the last objective here sort of aligns with Warren's work, where we'll be looking at the molecular signatures. And this is where we'll be sending samples down to Warren and his team to sort of compare to the results he's seen before with ME/CFS patients, to sort of see, how well they align with this patient group. As we're still in the thick of this pandemic, despite everyone wanting to be back to normal, these studies will be ongoing, because different variants may cause different types of havoc for people, in different spectrum of symptoms. So we don't know, and we don't know if the different variants are going to cause different or have different risk factors for ME/CFS, essentially. But at the very least, as it's sort of becoming clear, it will be highly likely that within time, SARS-CoV-2 will be identified as a cause of ME/CFS as well. It's just that there's, that the spectrum of long-term health impacts from this virus may be even more extensive than that. So I'll just quickly touch on where we're heading to next. We, as well as obviously people impacted by the virus itself, there is a huge demand to understand vaccinations in people with ME/CFS too, because it's not just the concern of getting infected, we also need to be vaccinated. We know historically people with ME can respond differently to vaccinations, and we need to understand why. So this is sort of, it's almost a second project, if you like, but it's an extension of this work. So the current study is mostly related to, sort of new onset ME, but the second part, we absolutely need controls or, people with ME/CFS so that we can start to compare any of the immune dysfunction we find, plus also understand more about vaccinations. So we know that, depending on the surveys, because there's been no official studies in this space, between 20 to 30% of people with ME experienced a worsening of their condition following the COVID-19 vaccination. And we need to understand more about this. Therefore, if we understand more about why people, that if we can understand the different layers of immune dysfunction, then moving forward, we will be able to be better inform people as to what their immune response is going to be like. That is the grand hope here. So as Ainsmees did a survey on this, there are surveys around that have been conducted, but there's been no official research. So we hope to expand out to actually get a deeper understanding of the impacts of vaccination on people with ME/CFS, so that because there's an obvious weighing up of risk here, how the vaccine affects you versus, the risk of the virus itself, which we still know is a very serious virus, and we are trying to all avoid this at all costs. So that's sort of just a brief update on where we're heading to with this. And again, all this work has been crowdfunded. I'll refer to all the amazing support we've had so far at the end, but just wanted to highlight that there too. So I'm not going to go into the details of this slide, so I'm just going to quickly whiz through this, but this is just a slide to show you that we're going to be looking at blood samples. We're going to be isolating so blood samples here. We're going to be isolating cells from the blood, and we're going to be looking at the serum and the plasma. So across all these different sample types, we're going to be doing some deep dive assessment of full immune spectral profile, immune profiling using spectral cytometry. We're going to be looking at immune responses, we're going to be looking at antibody responses, and we're going to be looking at protein. So that's just I won't go into the details of that. So I'm just going to sort of quickly whiz through sort of just to finish up the huge amount of support and networks that we've been building over time. Obviously, I've mentioned the collaboration with Warren here in New Zealand. And on the side here, it's just sort of a list of some of those networks that are continuing to grow. So first of all, over this side, these are the collaborations that are underway. Obviously, Ainsmees has been a huge support. So I'm in regular discussions and aligning, what the research demands are with what we are doing. I've had a collaboration with a company to help with some of the to set up some of the immune assays. There's a huge international LongCovered consortium. It gets a bit difficult being here in New Zealand in the time zone, but I've just listed here a handful of the key researchers and physicians that are involved in this consortium, and it continues to grow. But that's been critical to share ideas internationally, and many of those overlap with ME/CFS, and because that has also been absolutely critical, as it would be and should be, to align with what we know about ME/CFS, so that we are not reinventing the wheel, and bringing everyone together to better understand these illnesses is really critical. And so I've got a collaboration with an immunologist over in Monash University. I regularly engage with and advise and help with the LongCovered patient group. As I've said, I'm on the Ainsmees committee, so that's sort of overlapping into ME as well. I've got a collaboration with a group in Germany where we're going to, which sort of aligns with some of the historical research in ME about deformability of cells, or essentially, looking at not just the type of immune cell, but their function as well, how squishy they are. I didn't really go into detail about that, but essentially I've got a collaboration going with them. And more recently, as I said, there's a couple of under construction collaborations because we're just in the discussion point. But I recently met with Professor Jeremy Nicholson, who's at Western Australia. And if you're interested, there's an RNZ interview on his work, and he's super keen to have our patient sample sent over. And that's absolutely going to be both long COVID and ME/CFS. And the possibilities there are quite huge. So there's lots going on in the space. And across New Zealand, I haven't even listed off all the New Zealand researchers in this space or the connections, because there's so many and we haven't got anything official in place yet. But essentially, it's there's a lot of collaboration across the country, which is fantastic. And I haven't mentioned long COVID kids. Yes, this is happening in kids too. I've been working a bit with a pediatrician who's based in Italy, and also the long COVID kids group in the UK. I'm an ambassador, or what do we call them? A champion there. So we all work together to essentially raise awareness that this is happening in children as well. So a core part of, this is not just about research in the traditional sense, the integration with patient advocacy and making change for both, for long COVID, yes, but the key thing here is bringing together and bringing with us the necessity for change and research for people with ME as well. So all this work and where we are today would never have taken off without funding support. Everything that I have done to date has been through crowdfunding. So, there's plenty of people who are involved in this space, so much voluntary time because of there's shared passion in this space. So I just need to quickly whiz round and for the thanks in the space. So as I've mentioned, we've got reagents that have come out of Monash University to do some of the immune work. Some early serology work was done by my collaborator, Nikki Moreland, up at the med school. Crowdfunding, this would not have happened without crowdfunding. And the patient initially, Janine Crossham, launched our crowdfunding site, and it's just been exploding since then. We've had a fundraising event through Just Giving and Cycle for ME/CFS to donate to this research. Incredible effort by James. I think he raised close to $20,000, which was just amazing. And this is sort of what I've sort of centralized on here is the team at the university that helped facilitate getting every cent of every philanthropic funding into my research account. That there's no shavings off anywhere. It is all 100% donated to the research. Amesme's, oh my goodness, again, the research wouldn't be possible without the incredible support in both the initial long COVID study, plus also recently to help expand into people with ME so that we can expand out our research project so I can get more help in the lab essentially. Even my lab team that process blood samples, they're on borrowed time too. So the immunology professor here, has been donating essentially for the early part of the study, staff time to help with this. I mentioned that a company that's helping establish an assay here, and donations and grants from other aspects. My school, my university, they've donated funds to this too. So just generally speaking, there's been an outpouring of support in this space, and we hope this will continue. But obviously, we hope that funders and will also sort of see the importance of this work and start funding more and more research in this space. There are plenty of New Zealanders passionate about this, plenty of overseas as well. So we're really, really excited about where this will head. And obviously, just finishing up on acknowledgements, there are a ton of people, as I've said, involved in all of this. I've mentioned most of them just now, but I also just want to flick through some other groups that I haven't previously mentioned on the other slides. There are the international patient groups, you know, constant back and forth with, basically just the connections internationally have been critical in this space. So that involves patients, the collaborators, the team here in my lab that have been helping, sometimes, as I said, on donated time, the little bits and pieces of funding. We've worked with IMAC a lot, and even the lab test team who do the blood draws. You know, there's been so much support across the board. So that was just a brief overview of where we're heading. We've been collecting samples, but now we're sort of at a critical time point where we can start to get moving and start to get preliminary results, and to bring both ME/CFS into this as well is really exciting, given the connections we've made internationally, the new technologies and the new preliminary results coming through. I think there's absolutely new hope for ME/CFS too. And critically, learning from ME/CFS is undoubtedly going to help people with long COVID. And with that, I will end. Thank you.